In the brutal calculus of the cosmos, there is no greater crime than upsetting the established order. Gods demand worship, mortals provide it. But what happens when the architect looks upon his creation and feels not detachment, but empathy? What happens when a god commits the ultimate sin, choosing to love mortals more than he fears his kin? Now, let's open the archives and deconstruct the tragedy of this legendary monster. His name was Prometheus. Forethought. He was not a monster in form, but in ideology. A titan, a remnant of the old order that Zeus had violently overthrown, Prometheus was tolerated on Olympus but never trusted. And it was he who was tasked with sculpting mankind from the wet clay of the earth. He shaped them, breathed reason into them. But they were incomplete. When we look at the early state of humanity in the myth, we see a fragile, beast-like existence. They were Zeus's playthings, cowering in caves, freezing in the dark, ignorant and starving. They were creatures of mud, and Zeus intended for them to stay that way. This is the first critical point of deconstruction. This was not a story about a benevolent king. This was a story about a tyrant. Zeus, in his paranoia, saw mortals not as subjects, but as a potential threat. To him, ignorance was a leash. Prometheus, the architect, saw this and could not endure it. His defining trait, his forethought, was also his curse. He saw the potential flickering within his creations, and he saw the cold indifference of his king. He was trapped between loyalty to his divine, brutal family and an agonizing empathy for his shivering mortal children. The choice he made was not one of impulse. It was a calculated act of treason. The myth tells us he stole fire in a hollow fennel stalk. This is a poetic understatement. He didn't just steal a tool. He stole a concept. He stole the divine spark, the techne, the very essence of craft, civilization, and thought. He climbed Olympus, took the fire from the hearth of the gods, and delivered it to mortals. In that single act, he elevated humanity from mud to rivals. He gave them the warmth to survive the night, the light to banish the dark, the forge to build tools, and the hearth to build a community. He gave them a future. For Zeus, this was the ultimate betrayal. It was not theft, it was insurrection. Prometheus had armed the prisoners. He had broken the divine monopoly on power. And in the cold, brutal logic of a dictatorship, there is only one response to such a rebellion: annihilation. Prometheus knew this. His forethought guaranteed he knew the price. He did it anyway. His crime was not theft. His crime was love. Zeus's retribution was not swift. It was meticulous. It was engineered. A mortal who commits treason is simply killed, a quick, messy affair of blood and dust. But how do you punish a god? How do you inflict a finite penalty on an infinite being? You do not. You create an infinite punishment. Zeus did not merely want to hurt Prometheus. He wanted to unmake him. He wanted to create a living monument to his own authority, a spectacle of agony that would echo through the ages. He had Prometheus dragged to the furthest edge of the known world, to the desolate, wind-scoured peaks of the Caucasus Mountains. This location was not chosen by chance. It was a place of ultimate isolation, a liminal space between the heavens and the earth, belonging to neither. He was to be a prisoner, visible to both gods and men, yet reachable by none. The chains that bound him were a tragedy in themselves, forged by Hephaestus, the god of the forge, the very god whose fire Prometheus had stolen. This was Zeus's cruel poetry. The craft that Prometheus had gifted to mortals was now used to enslave him. He was pinned to the rock, not just shackled, but impaled, driven through the granite, a divine specimen pinned for study. But the chains were merely the prison. The torture was a masterpiece of biological horror. Every morning, as the first light of dawn struck the frozen peaks, a creature would descend from the sky. This was Aethon, the Caucasian eagle. This was no ordinary bird. It was a divine instrument of torment, described as a winged hound of Zeus. Its purpose was singular. It would land on the bound Titan's chest, spread its vast wings to blot out the sun, and begin its work. The myth tells us it ate his liver. We must deconstruct this. This is not a random detail. When we apply biological logic, this is the most terrifying part of the curse.
The liver is the only internal organ in the human and presumably Titan body capable of full regeneration from a fragment. Zeus, in his cold genius, had weaponized immortality. He had found the one part of Prometheus that could be destroyed and would flawlessly rebuild itself, not as a function of healing, but as a function of refueling the torture. Let us profile this existence. Prometheus was a god of forethought. He was a being of intellect, of reason. His prison was not just physical, it was psychological. Imagine the physical agony, the unyielding cold of the rock, the bite of the chains. Then the psychological torment of the dawn. The sound of those wings, not a swoosh, but a thun, 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 beating the thin mountain air. The anticipation. The dread. The eagle's talons, not just claws, but divine implements tearing through immortal flesh. The pain would be absolute. Then the beak, sharp enough to cut through God stuff, rooting around his insides, finding the organ. We must assume a being who crafted humanity feels pain just as acutely, if not more so. And then the relief of the eagle finishing its meal. A hollow, agonizing void left in his torso. But the relief is a lie, because then the second phase of the torture begins, the regeneration. We cannot assume this process was painless. It's not healing, it's a forced, rapid, divine regrowth. A knitting of flesh, a burning, itching cellular replication at an unnatural speed. It would be a second agony, a reminder that his own body was his co-conspirator. His own divine nature was the engine of his suffering. He would spend the night in the freezing dark, his body healing itself, making itself perfect for the next day's violation. All so that when the sun rose, the eagle would find a pristine, complete liver ready for the harvest. This is the brutal logic of Zeus. A regenerative prison. A perfect, closed loop of suffering. Prometheus, the god of forethought, was trapped in a present that would never, ever end. He could see the future, but his own future was only this: the rock, the chain, and the eagle. Forever.
His suffering was not silent, nor was it hidden. It was a message broadcast from the Caucasus to every corner of the cosmos. To the gods, It was a warning against treason. To mortals, it was a terrifying reminder of their own insignificance. But a message can be interpreted in ways the sender never intended. As millennia of agony ground on, Prometheus's prison became a pilgrimage site of the human spirit. We see his legacy not in the chains, but in what those chains cost. Every time a mortal lit a fire to stay warm, they were burning a piece of Prometheus's stolen divinity. Every time they forged a tool, they were hammering out the future he had bought for them. His torture was the literal, agonizing engine of human progress. This is the ultimate narrative reframing. The hero of this story, Zeus, is a tyrant whose entire order is built on the suppression of knowledge. The monster, Prometheus, is a political prisoner, a martyr for empathy. His true curse was never the eagle. It was his forethought. He was the God who could see the future, and we must therefore conclude that he saw this. He saw the rock. He saw the chains. And he saw the eagle's wings blocking the sun. He knew the precise cost of his compassion, and he made the choice. This transforms his suffering from a simple punishment into a profound act of sacrifice. His psychological prison was far worse than the physical. It was the daily, agonizing knowledge that his children, humanity, were thriving. And that they were thriving precisely because he was screaming in agony on a frozen mountaintop. He was the dark foundation upon which every human city, every poem, every philosophical thought was built. When the hero, Heracles, finally arrives, centuries later, to break the chains and kill the eagle, it is more than the liberation of a single titan. It is the narrative validation of his choice. It is the moment that humanity, in the form of its greatest hero, finally becomes strong enough to defend its creator. The student returns to free the master. Prometheus's gamble, made in an act of treasonous love, had finally paid off. His story is a brutal mirror to our own existence. It forces us to ask what we are willing to endure for what we believe, and what suffering is woven into the very fabric of our comfort. The fire he gave us was a gift, but it was not free. It was paid for by millennia of divine agony. It reminds us that the greatest tragedies are often not found in death, but in the agonizing, infinite price of defiance. And that a monster is often just a god who loved the wrong thing.